chop him half my head off. Okay, so tonight we're going to be looking at Revelation chapter 17. And we are up to verses 7. Yeah, verse 7 of 17. Tonight I'm going to do verse 7 through to and including verse 13, which I shall read out to you. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and the 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7th, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So it sounds quite complex, doesn't it? It is quite complex. Again, this is following on from what we've been doing for weeks. So if this is your first time seeing this, it's kind of a bit like, I don't quite understand. You'll have to go back and watch the others. I haven't got time to really keep updating. But just again, I'm only going to comment on what I understand here. I'm not into sort of guessing or, creating myths. So I'm only going to teach on what I see to be the most plausible meaning. And like I've said before, it's not like, I had a dream and God revealed it all to me. The opinion, the position and interpretation of the book of Revelation that I give is the historic Orthodox Protestant view of the book of Revelation by and large, and it's just that it's been kind of forgotten by a lot of churches, or it's not fashionable, but I am going to just basically reiterate what many other Bible scholars have said through the years. So let's dive into it. Last week we had the mystery or the secret of the mother of harlots revealed, and of course it's perhaps worth remembering it was revealed by Jesus. Jesus is the one who is unfolding this revelation. And we looked at how the woman, shocking though this might be, according to the traditional Protestant interpretation, the woman represents the Roman Catholic Church, and at the same time, sort of historically, Rome itself. And that is now confirmed here in verse 9. I'm going to sort of skip back and forth through the verses. Verse 9 says, And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains or 7 hills on which the woman sits. It's a geographical, historical fact that Rome is built on 7 hills. And each hill actually has a name. They are difficult to pronounce, so I'm not going to attempt it. But every hill also, for every hill there is a king or ruler, or in this case a pope, because in the past the popes have had papal residences or palaces on most of these hills at one time or another. So I'm not going to try and pronounce them now, but what I'll do is I'll put a list of this information, if you're watching this video now, or for you who've not quite got to upload the video, but I will put a name of all these details and this information in the information section of the video when it goes onto YouTube. So yeah, just if you're watching this now, look down in the information section and there's a list of all the hills and the popes who are associated with them. That is if I remember to do that. So now let's have a look at what it says in verse 8. It says, and yes, so verse 8 says, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. Perdition is destruction. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. And when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. So back in Revelation 13, you might remember, we talked about the beast from the sea and the beast from the earth, and I said that they represent two different aspects of the papacy. Well, now we see a third aspect, if you like, a demonic aspect, because the beast now is not rising out of the sea, but is rising out of the bottomless pit. So let's have a look at Galatians chapter 1 and do a bit of cross-referencing. So Galatians 1 verse 6. So before I read it out, Paul here is speaking to the church at Galatia, and they had a problem where they'd received the gospel from Paul, but now other people were coming along with a false gospel, if you like, and they were starting to listen to them. And so Paul is addressing this issue. He says, I marvel that ye are so soon removed from him that called you into the grace of Christ unto another gospel. So this is another gospel, or a different gospel, which is not another, but there be some that trouble you and would pervert the gospel of Christ. But though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel unto you than that which we have preached unto you, let him be accursed. As we said before, so say I now again, if any man preach any other gospel unto you than that ye have received, let him be accursed. For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I yet pleased men, I should not be the servant of Christ. So, in this passage, Paul raises some important issues and he gives us some warnings about spiritual deception. And we could sort of make a little list, if you like, that goes like this. 1, if somebody brings a gospel that is different from the gospel that Paul preached, it's a false gospel. So that means we need to be familiar with what Paul's teaching is. And the only way to get familiar with Paul's teaching is to read what Paul wrote and to know it. So there's no excuse really. We've got to read our Bibles as part of our protection against false teaching. Secondly, just because this false gospel might be pleasing to men and women doesn't mean that it's pleasing to God. That's what he said, didn't he, at the end? Do I now please men or God? If I please men, I should not be a servant of Jesus Christ. So if something pleases a lot of men and women, that's not the confirmation. That's not, oh, well, it must be true, because all these people all agree. Paul's saying, no, because if that was what I was trying to do to please everybody, I wouldn't be a servant of Jesus Christ, because a lot of the things that Jesus says don't please people, right? Repent and believe the gospel. Repent, turn away from your sins, isn't pleasing to a lot of people. They don't want to hear that message. The third warning that we have here in Galatians is even if it were preached by an angel, even by an angelic being, if it's false, don't accept it. If it's different to what Paul preaches, don't accept it. So even if it has that kind of some kind of supernatural power behind it, an angel, a visitation, a vision, whatever, this incredible experience, Paul's saying you've got to measure it against the gospel, what the apostles taught, what Paul taught, what Peter taught, what John taught. And if it doesn't line up, then don't accept it. So just to kind of expand that idea a little bit, 2 Corinthians 11. Second Corinthians 11. And verse 13. So Paul here says, for such are false apostles. So this is people who teach a false gospel, a different gospel. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. So Paul is saying these people who teach a false gospel, a different gospel to the apostles, they pass themselves off as apostles of Christ and themselves as ministers of righteousness. So not coming out and saying, we're evil and wicked and we're going to deceive you. They appear to be teachers of truth and so on. And he says, well, no wonder, because Satan himself transforms himself to an angel of light. It's as if he can transform himself. He can change his appearance. We see it in the Garden of Eden. He appears as a serpent. Elsewhere in the Bible, he appears as a dragon. So he has this. He's like a changeling. He can change his appearance. On some occasions, he can come brutally with persecution. At other times, he comes with false teaching. Subtly, carefully, leading people astray. And so that's the warning. Really, is there's a subtlety about the danger here. So when we talk about the beast that rises from the bottomless pit, or from the abyss, what this represents is a rising in power of the papacy, but a rising of, if you like, the unseen beast behind the throne, that which is sort of devilish and dangerous. And so just the fact that, if ministers pass themselves off as ministers of righteousness, how do we know if they are? Well, is what they preach, does it line up with what we read in the Bible, with what the apostles taught? Because remember, in Acts 2 it says that the early church, the New Testament church, devoted themselves, or they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine, amongst other things. But that's one of them. The apostolic doctrine, the teaching of the apostles, they knew it and they continued in it. They didn't change it or, bring in teachers who taught something differently. That was one of the things that they continued steadfastly in. And we, if we are going to be inheritors of that church and of every or the values that they held, we must continue in apostolic doctrine. We must hold to it as well, whether it's fashionable or not fashionable, whether it's popular or not popular. This is what Paul says to Timothy, isn't it? Preach the word, be instant, in season and out of season. That means, if it's really, really popular and everybody likes it, great, preach it. If it's really, really unpopular and nobody likes it, still preach it. Don't change it, because the truth is the truth. So yes, I believe this is what we're looking at here. Really is the rising of the power of the papacy and the sort of spiritual element to that's behind it, the spiritual element of corruption and unbiblical teaching, which is also starting to rise now. So verse 10, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue for a short space. So yes, now we have a specific time period basically given. 5 kings or / popes have lived and died. 1 is presently in power, and 1 will eventually come and continue for a short time. So these are mentioned so that the church would be able to detect when this time would be upon them. It's like work it out, is this the time? I believe that time has come and gone. But again, I'll put a list into the section of this, the information section of this video. So then we have verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So these are most likely monarchs or governments. So it says they've received no kingdom as yet, meaning not in John's time, nor perhaps in many years' time after that. So 7 kings or popes, and then 10 kings or governments. But it's saying, I'm showing you them in the vision, but they haven't yet got a kingdom. That will come later, probably long after John is dead. Then these kings they'll receive this kingdom. So he's just being shown this in the vision. So let's see. Verse 13. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So really the muscle, if you like, of the papacy is found in these kings, these what I believe are secular rulers. And they'll do whatever the Pope tells them to do. And they will be under his command. And historically, that's exactly what happened, particularly in Europe. The Pope was so powerful, was so revered, that the other nations came under his control. They would just do what he told them to do, because he was like the head of the church. Remember, there was a time where really for the West, there was no other church than the Roman Catholic Church. And anybody who, you couldn't sort of say, oh, I think I'll just go and I won't go to church, I'll just stay at home and read the Bible. Because you couldn't do that, because the Bible was only in Latin. It wasn't allowed to be translated into other languages like it is now. And if you didn't attend church, you'd be in big trouble. You could be fined, you could be imprisoned. It was like really different. And that was when the Roman Catholic Church was really in power. That power extended over kings, over governments, over nations. And so this is one of the reasons why I think it fits so well. So I want to finish off tonight just by going back to verse 8, which was the first verse that we looked at. And the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition, as they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, and yet is. Kind of sounds a bit like a riddle, doesn't it? So those that follow the beast and those that marvel is like, wow, I can't believe what's happening. These are not Christians. It says their names are not written in the book of life. So it's those who are following and sort of saying, well, all these people surely can't be wrong. This is, we'll follow this Pope, we'll follow the Roman Catholic Church. it's quite clear here. Jesus is saying, yeah, their names are not written in the book of life. They're not Christians. And that the beast that was and is not and yet is. Now, if you recall, when we looked at the rising of the beast, I said that first of all, the power of Rome exerts itself in imperial pagan Rome, doesn't it? But then later on we get this rising of the papacy, which is not a lot different. There's not much difference between pagan Rome and papal Rome, in effect. It's just a massively powerful empire, really, that's in Rome. And so the beast that was and is not and yet is, I'll put it like this: there was power under the Roman pagan emperor, but then there was not when that empire fell. And there will be again power when the 10 kingdoms give their power to the Pope. So I think that's what it's saying. It's like 3 stages, if you like. The rise of imperial Rome, which ruled the earth, but then the Roman Empire fell. So it was, it is not, but it will be when these 10 kings or kingdoms give their power to the papacy. But eventually the beast will, quote, go into perdition, will be destroyed. And that's what we're going to look at as we go through what that destruction is going to be like. So I hope it makes sense. It's complicated this week. Some weeks are simpler than others. We have taken in quite a lot tonight. But again, the key focus all the way through Revelation is really Jesus talking about purifying the church, about the church not being deceived, about the church staying faithful to him. And I think we've seen that all the way through the book of Revelation. So much of it, it's not like focused on what's happening in politics, what's happening in Israel. It's all time. It's like Christ's church must be a pure church. We must be a church that holds to the truth, that doesn't compromise the truth, that isn't led astray by the majority of people. And it's that purity of life and action, and that purity of truth and doctrine that this is why Jesus is giving these warnings through John to the church, because there will be things that come along to the church that will be a temptation, could be persecution, right? That's a big temptation. If you're a Christian, you're being persecuted, you're in danger, you could be tempted to compromise or to say, right, I'm not a Christian anymore. And this is what Jesus is warning at. There will be persecution. Also, there will be subtle false doctrines and heresies coming into the church. And Jesus is saying you need to be able to test those, not end up falling for them, like protect yourself, hold to the truth. And so these are the 2-pronged attack of Satan, as I've said before, is he comes like a dragon, that is a ferocious beast persecuting the church, or he comes as a serpent, subtle, crafty, changing doctrines, changing teaching, bringing in heresies and so on. And the church and individual Christians must be on their guard against those things, and we must help one another to guard against those things, so that the church can be purified, because we want a faithful church that's following Jesus Christ, that's continuing in his teaching, in his doctrine. So I think that's what I'm taking from all of this. You can debate over what different verses mean and what different things symbolize, and that's fine. I have found this interpretation the most plausible, the most robust interpretation. But even if you can't remember what everything symbolises, remember that truth and purity in the church is what we need, and that will protect us against the schemes of the devil.